Carlos Delgado might be the most overlooked slugger of his era. He was a feared hitter who put together one of the most decorated careers of any player during his time in baseball. Despite that, he was a one and done on the Hall of Fame ballot, as he received less than 4% of the vote on his only appearance there. His placement outside of Cooperstown might change as soon as tonight, as he's up for election via the Veterans Committee. Just how good was this player, and should he be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame? Carlos Delgado was a first baseman who played in Major League Baseball for 17 seasons from 1993 to 2009. He played for 3 teams, but spent the most time with the Toronto Blue Jays. In his career, Delgado played in over 2,000 games and came to the plate nearly 8,700 times. He slashed .280 with a .383 on base and .546 slugging for a .929 OPS and 138 adjusted OPS. He has over 2,000 hits, which includes nearly 1,000 extra base hits, scored over 1,200 runs, and has over 1,500 RBIs, collected nearly 4,000 total bases, reached base over 3,300 times, and earned 44.4 WAR. He's a 2-time All-Star, 3-time Silver Slugger Award winner, and received MVP votes in 7 seasons. His best placement being runner-up for the American League MVP in 2003. His most notable stat, however, are his home runs, as Delgado hit 473 home runs during his long career. We'll get to the home runs a little later. I don't think I need to explain any of those numbers. You don't have nearly 1,000 extra base hits and several MVP caliber seasons by accident. With that being said, just how good was Carlos Delgado during his time in baseball, as well as compared to players throughout MLB history? From 1993 to 2009, Delgado ranks inside the top 5 in extra base hits and runs batted in, top 15 in total bases and times on base, top 30 in runs scored and hits, and top 40 in WAR. Among 29 players during this span, with at least 8,000 plate appearances, Delgado has the 10th highest OPS and 10th highest adjusted OPS. If we were to just look at first baseman, Delgado is either second or third in all of the counting stats, except for hits and WAR, where he ranks 4th and 8th respectively. Among 22 first basemen with at least 5,000 plate appearances here, Delgado is 6th in OPS and 6th in adjusted OPS. Solid placements everywhere, but that all of course takes into account his entire career. How well does Delgado hold up during his prime years? In a 10-season span from 1997 to 2006, Delgado is within the top 5 in extra base hits, runs batted in and total bases, top 12 in times on base and runs scored, and top 25 in hits and WAR. Yes, you did read that correctly. He had more extra base hits than any other player in this decade-long stretch. Among 66 players with at least 5,000 plate appearances, Delgado has the 7th highest OPS and 7th highest adjusted OPS. To look at just first baseman again, he's within the top 3 in all of the counting stats, with the exception of WAR, where he ranks 6th. Of the 26 first basemen with at least 3,000 plate appearances, Delgado is 5th in OPS and 4th in adjusted OPS. Those are all fantastic, but it only covers Delgado's time in the league. How good was he when compared to everybody all time? Throughout the history of Major League Baseball, Delgado ranks inside the top 55 in extra base hits and RBIs, top 100 in total bases, top 160 in times on base and runs scored, and top 285 in hits and WAR. Out of the 211 players to come to the plate at least 8,500 times, Delgado has the 23rd highest OPS and 44th highest adjusted OPS. If we decrease the minimum threshold to 7,500 plate appearances, in which there's been 367 players with as many, Delgado is 28th in OPS and 56th in adjusted OPS. Looking at first baseman one last time, Delgado is inside the top 10 in extra base hits, top 20 in RBIs and total bases, top 30 in runs scored and times on base, top 40 in WAR, and top 50 in hits. Among the 61 first basemen with at least 7,500 plate appearances, Delgado has the 8th highest OPS and 15th highest adjusted OPS. For what it's worth, if we decrease the minimum threshold to 6,000 plate appearances, in which 109 first basemen hit that mark, he now ranks 10th in OPS and 19th in adjusted OPS. That was a lot said, so to sum up everything I've mentioned so far, during his time in baseball, Delgado was around a top 10 to 15 player in the big leagues. Most of his stats are somewhere in that 10 to 15 range, so I think that's a fair assessment. For first baseman, he's right around top 5. Looking at his prime years, Delgado is absolutely in the top 10 of players, I'd even say borderline top 8. Looking at his position again, somewhere in the top 5. For players all time, that kind of varies. Some of his counting stats have incredible placements, while some others are lacking. His analytical stats are amazing though, as his adjusted OPS ranks around 50th place. I don't think anyone would argue against him being a top 100 hitter of all time. As for first baseman, he ranks around 20th at that position. His analytical stats sit around that number, as well as several of his counting stats. This all begs one important question. Should Carlos Delgado get elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame? This might be an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say yes. Carlos Delgado should be in the Hall of Fame, and I'll tell you why. First and foremost, Delgado was a top 10 hitter in baseball, both during his entire career and when he was at his best. I looked at a 10-year span earlier, but we can honestly go beyond that. Delgado's first season was in 1996, and his last full season in 2008. To name just a few placements during that 13-year span, he hit the 6th most home runs, hit the 3rd most extra base hits, and has the 7th highest adjusted OPS for any player with a minimum 7,500 plate appearances. There were just so few number of players that were as good as him for that long of a time. Speaking of which, I might add that most of the players in front of Delgado for various placements are tied to PEDs in some way, while Delgado himself has no ties to them at all. Take his 473 home runs hit during his career from 1993 to 2009. That's the 8th most hit during that span, and here are the 7 players that hit more. Of those 7, only 2 of them, Jim Thome and Ken Griffey Jr., are not tied to PEDs. Speaking of home runs, Delgado's 473 homers are the 34th most all time. That's pretty good, but what if I told you those are the most home runs hit by any eligible, clean player? There are only 9 players in MLB history to hit more home runs and not get elected into the Hall of Fame. 7 of those 9 are tied to PEDs, while the other 2 are not eligible yet. I would like to repeat that last part because it sounds vaguely important. Carlos Delgado is the greatest home run hitter in baseball history that's A, eligible for the Hall of Fame, and B, isn't associated with steroids. I think that alone gives Delgado a strong case for enshrinement into Cooperstown. Oh, by the way, it's the exact same situation with his adjusted OPS. Of all the players in baseball history with at least 8,500 plate appearances, Delgado has the highest adjusted OPS of any eligible player that has no ties to PEDs. He is legitimately the best clean slugger that could be elected into the Hall of Fame that isn't. For those curious, here's the full list of players that have a higher adjusted OPS with so many plate appearances that are not in the Hall of Fame. 5 players linked to steroids, and 3 that are not eligible yet. If you still don't agree, may I compare Delgado to a couple of first basemen already in the Hall of Fame. On the left side of the screen are Delgado's career numbers. On the right side are the stats from Hall of Famer Orlando Cepeda. In a near identical number of plate appearances, Delgado outclasses Cepeda everywhere, with the exception of hits and WAR. How about someone that played in the same era as Delgado? May I put on screen the numbers from Hall of Famer Fred McGriff. In spite of McGriff having 1,500 more plate appearances, the two players have very similar numbers in many areas, and of course, Delgado's analytical stats fare better. If you believe Orlando Cepeda and Fred McGriff rightfully deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, certainly you would agree Delgado needs to be in as well. Carlos Delgado was one of the greatest sluggers, not only during his era, but throughout the history of Major League Baseball. His numbers are unbelievable to say the least, and he absolutely deserves to be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame.